Good morning, our viewers. Welcome to the Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee, a feature of Council for Strategic Affairs. Today is September 27th, Saturday. It is approximately 9:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in United States, and we have a very distinguished guest, General Syed Hasnain, who does not need any introduction from me. Everyone knows him. So for sake of brevity, we will not give a detailed introduction. He's a scholar soldier. He introduced two doctrines while he was in service. One of them was Hart's doctrine, and second, of course, scholar soldier doctrine. We are talking about a very important topic. On September 17th, a bilateral mutual defense pact was signed between Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And it had a clause which is almost akin to NATO, Article 5 clause of each country coming to mutual defense assistance if other country is attacked. So we are going to have a conversation with General Hasnain, who has written on this particular topic and has been interviewed earlier. So welcome to our platform, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. My pleasure and honor, absolutely.
So coming to this, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have had friendship treaty since 1951, some kind of defense agreement or military agreement since 1981. What is the immediate reason on September 17th that this bilateral mutual defense pact was signed?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me for your program. And we'll jump straight into the response. Your question also, and what was the immediate requirement? That's the most important aspect. We can go into the backdrop subsequently to have a look. The immediate requirement, I think, was the fact that Saudi Arabia was essentially feeling extremely peeved with what is happening in Gaza, its lack of influence over Israel. And over the last couple of years, the Saudi-Israeli relationship had improved by miles. Also, the fact that Israel decided to go against all norms and attack Qatar, even at a time when the ceasefire was being negotiated. All this perhaps put the Saudis on the back foot, who perhaps perceived that all was not well, and that the rising kind of intransigence of Israel could one day possibly affect them too. Besides that, all that the Chinese had done to try and bring about some kind of a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, a very transactional kind of approach to get rid of the sectarian conflict, that also had really been virtually shelved. So from two directions, although both the directions are Israel and Iran, which are adversaries against each other too, but Saudi Arabia was generally in the environment of West Asia was feeling a little insecure. To my mind, the signing of this agreement is more of a psychological step. It is more of a psychological, tactical step and not a strategic step, because things happening at the moment in that part of the world are too complex, and no one can predict as to what the long-term aspects of those will result in. So at the moment, what we are seeing essentially is the Saudis securing themselves psychologically to an extent and going back to some of the arrangements that they had with the Pakistanis earlier. Just to remind our viewers that in 1981 and afterwards, Pakistan had two brigades inside Saudi Arabia. They were the nation which was trusted to actually provide safety and security to the royal family of Saudi Arabia. This lasted till almost 1991-92 when the two brigades finally returned. And also the fact that General Rahil Sharif, a former army chief of the Pakistan Army, was appointed the head of the counter-terrorism coalition of 39 Muslim nations, also is stationed there in Riyadh, for many, many years.
So, coming to this kind of psychological messaging in West Asia, is there also messaging to Washington, D.C., that Saudi Arabia is adopting multi-alignment and responding to multipolarity rather than be under benign umbrella of Washington, D.C. alone?
I think that's an absolutely brilliant observation and a very, very good question. And for that, I think we'll have to go back to the previous Trump administration, Trump 1.0, in which, if you remember, one of the major strategic decisions was the direction that the US administration had taken with the adoption of what was called the Abraham Accords. And these were signed with a host of West Asian countries, but not with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia eventually perhaps would have signed this if the relationship had gone in a very, very hunky-dory kind of a way. But that didn't happen. Now with Israel itself not listening to the United States, with Mr. Trump himself fairly upset with Benjamin Netanyahu, and the fact that no one listened to the United States even when the decision to bomb Qatar was taken, obviously the Saudis would be feeling that being just under the US umbrella may not be sufficient in terms of its security. Remembering also the fact that we are in 2025, by 2032, Saudi Arabia is essentially looking to get over its energy obsession and take the country outside, beyond that, into the world of trading and super economics as such. That is the stage when they will actually want to make sure that they are completely secure. And they would not want some kind of an internal turbulence of the kind which happened in 2014 with the rise of ISIS. Of course, at that time, the United States came to their assistance. Iran was there itself. Russia came. Now, with this kind of situation, which is very, very awkward at the moment, there is no guarantee as to who would come to the assistance of Saudi Arabia if a situation arose of that kind. So I think the Saudis were essentially taking a step towards a degree of, I won't say independence, but a degree of autonomy. That on their own also, they have options to go to other partners to guarantee them their security.
So we understand what are the predicaments of Saudi Arabia in the current West Asia quagmire. But what is in for Pakistan? How does Pakistan gain from this mutual defense pact?
Well, historically, as we said, Pakistan has always tried to detach itself from South Asia, to project itself as the flag bearer of Islam, as the country which most 200 million nation population country, second only to Indonesia, very, very populous. It had always hoped that it will reach a particular benchmark of comprehensive national power. That has not been possible because of its very, very flagging economy, which we are aware that 24 times they have been to the IMF for loans. Of course, having a country like Saudi Arabia to be in partnership with it, a revived partnership with it, sends out a great strategic message within the Islamic world among the 57 countries of the OIC itself. Because after all, Saudi Arabia is the custodian of the two holy shrines. And anyone who has linkages with Saudi Arabia, strategic linkages, is always considered to have a kind of an ideological or psychological advantage. So Pakistan is obviously looking at that. If it wants to step itself up in the future, if its economy improves, it has a strong army, 650,000 strong army. It has got nuclear weapons. It's got missilery. It is friendly with China. It is friendly with the United States. It doesn't have a bad relationship with Russia. Now, if it steps across into West Asia and has got a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, everything works to its advantage. So I think it's from that angle, not just the question of payrolling a couple of more $1 billion, but for the overall strategic advantage. But as I said before, the situation is very complex at this time. These are all early steps that we are seeing, which nations are taking essentially to secure their flanks, secure their backs. We haven't, this kind of an agreement is not something strategic for the very far direction in which we cannot still view.
So we know, and as you have said, that Saudi Arabia has bailed Pakistani economy to the tune of $6 billion in last few years. But Pakistan is also a member of a grouping called D8, which is basically 8 Islamic nations coming for economic cooperation. Saudi Arabia is not part of that, but people are talking about, quote unquote, this being a precursor, just like D8 is economic grouping, maybe a kind of security grouping in the Islamic world. And the word that has been bandied around is Islamic NATO. Would that be
a
possible?
Muslim NATO, as it's called, a Muslim NATO, as they are calling it. Yes, a lot has been written about this, although it has not been analyzed to any great depth yet, at least in Indian strategic circles so far. Primarily, the binary part of it, that is Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, is the issue which has been looked at in fair detail here. But looking at a potential Muslim NATO, you had one fairly strong kind of grouping of 39 nations, which Saudi Arabia had put together as a counter-terrorism coalition, if you remember. It is still very much in existence. It provides few forces in physical form, but mostly in readiness form. So, and there are countries like Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, all these countries have joined this coalition. It was set up at the time when the war in Yemen was launched, and with the time when ISIS had emerged and was threatening various in different directions in West Asia. So today, what is the likely adversary? Who is the likely adversary that one is looking at? One has to identify that. That perhaps will be a very important aspect, because if they are looking for a Muslim NATO, obviously they got to have the common adversaries. They will probably have something similar to Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which talks about mutuality of threats. If threat to one is a threat to all, and that kind of a thing. I think it's still a little premature to talk of this. As I said, a Muslim NATO will be something much more strategic. What we are looking at, the Pakistani-Saudi agreement, pact, and whatever we are looking in terms of the United States and Pakistan emerging relationship, all seems to be still in the tactical realm. As I said earlier, just to the cost of repetition, it is basically covering your backs and covering your flanks. I think to make it much more strategic, it will take its time.
So there is some talk that maybe United States was surprised by this bilateral agreement between Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Republic of Pakistan. What is your viewpoint on that? Is it done with the blessings of Washington, D.C., or it is bypassing that route in view of Israel's attacks on Doha, Qatar?
Well, in the beginning, when this happened, we were all tempted to jump into this and view it as an intransigent kind of an action that Saudi Arabia was taking to send home a message to the United States. Not that things have changed very drastically since then, but in the last 2 days or so, you are seeing some flurry of activity in Washington at the moment. You've seen President Erdogan of Turkey having come in and met him first time in 6 years. Come and met Trump. Earlier, I think it was he never visited Washington for a fairly long time. As I said, 6 years. Then you have found Asim Munir, the third time in the United States, the second time in the White House. And you have found along with him his assistant, the so-called Prime Minister of Pakistan, who is also accompanying him. Now, all this makes one feel that the United States has got something going. It's a little uncertain of itself about how West Asia has been handled so far. There are far too many dynamics which are taking place simultaneously. Mr. Netanyahu is not under complete control, not under the American control. The Americans don't have Ukraine and the Russia-Ukraine conflict either under control. At least they hope that this end should be closed properly. I think what they're looking at is essentially enhancing their outreach to different poles within the Middle East. Among them, Turkey, although not part of Middle East, is a European country, but definitely major influence in the Middle East. It is also looking at Israel itself. Obviously, the Israel-US relationship doesn't go anywhere. There can be blips here and there. Saudi Arabia and, interestingly, Pakistan, although a part of South Asia, but interestingly, Pakistan also as a player in the Muslim world of West Asia. So it is sort of spread its wings in terms of outreach, partnerships to go along with wherever some kind of a major turbulence emerges. America has got someone to play around with, someone who can be its anchor. This is the kind of theory which people are speaking about, at least among our strategic circles at the moment. But it seems a little premature to my mind. Whatever, as I said again at the cost of repetition, whatever the United States is attempting to do at this time has not been thought through. It is also doing all this essentially as a tactical measure to view its effects and see how this can be made more strategic into the future.
So while we are talking, you mentioned about Proud Marshal Munir's visit to Washington, D.C., along with his factotum. An agreement was signed in which Washington, D.C. agreed to spend $500 million to repair 11 air bases of Pakistan that were destroyed or damaged by India, ostensibly to be used in future against Iran. So you have this mutual defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan coming to each other's assistance, and Pakistan is willingly deploying its own airfields as US military bases to be used against Iran. How does that change the dynamics in West Asia?
That's a very, very interesting observation. At the outset, I think it still remains essentially a conjecture that the Pakistan-US relationship will ultimately result in a possibility, the potential of Pakistan providing its air bases for use against Iran from a different flank, from a completely different direction, that's from the eastern flank as such. This is what everyone thought about even when the Asim Munir lunch took place 3 months ago. I'm not sure that Pakistan would actually want to be. We are, of course, looking at the aspect that Iran is Shia and Saudi Pakistan essentially is Sunni. But I don't think within the Islamic world the sectarian divide is so intense at the moment where Pakistan would be willingly in a position to offer those kind of bases to the United States. Of course, it could happen. That's a different matter. But at the moment, it seems to be playing this out primarily for the purpose of winning a few favors. And among those favors, obviously, are economic flavors. $1 billion to $3 billion is what it is essentially looking out for bailouts from time to time. Of course, the Pakistani economy is improving. They are looking for long-term business. They're looking for crypto kind of cooperation with the United States. So there are lots of things in the offing, and these are issues which essentially Pakistan is building up, provide a conducive atmosphere for cooperation with the United States in the form of a strategic relationship or a strategic partnership. When the chips are down, I'm not sure whether Pakistan would so willingly be happy. Of course, we do remember 2001 when President Musharraf made all those remarks at that particular time, and he was absolutely cowed down with the rhetoric from the United States, which essentially conveyed that either be with us or against us.
Yes.
Right? So that kind of a situation can always build up. But I think at the moment, we have not crossed that halfway kind of a mark where you're looking at a potential American military action against Iran in the immediate future.
Any tactical or strategic maneuvering by Pakistan cannot be divorced from its posture, its anti-India posture, because that's a congenital hostility Pakistan has towards India. What Pakistan is trying to achieve by this strategic messaging by entering into a mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis India?
In fact, to take that question to an even larger level, I would say that the kind of outreach which the United States has been making to Pakistan somehow reeks of one fact, that if you leave India alone, then India, which is essentially in this so-called autonomy, in this posture of autonomy, has adopted a stance which is it takes it very close to Russia, and at the moment an emerging relationship with China. The pictures of SCO were flashed around the world. It did create some turbulence in the minds of the American strategic community. Obviously, for them to see India pressured from this direction of Pakistan does somehow add to the discomfiture of both Russia and China, because the Chinese will have to take sides. They'll have to take sides with Pakistan, obviously, against India. The Russians will be pushed. They will have to sort of go back to the Chinese to try and convince the Chinese not to take those kind of sides. So to add a complexity to the whole thing, the Americans do not want a Russia, India, China kind of an RIC grouping emerging on a stronger front. That's one of the reasons we are analyzing and wondering whether that is behind this entire outreach to Pakistan. But to come back to your question specifically, therefore, how does this add up to the fact of this relationship with Saudi Arabia? The Pakistanis would obviously be concerned that there will be an Indian response if there is a needling which is done at the instigation of triggering by the United States, and there will be a response. The United States is not going to come and fight Pakistan's wars. In fact, no Western country or no NATO country or anyone is going to come and fight their wars. They will have to fight with India themselves. So for that, they will need greater support from the Islamic world. And to have Saudi Arabia on their side would obviously make a huge difference for them. Remembering the fact that in 1965 or was it 1971, I can't exactly recall, they had the support of Jordan, where a couple of fighter aircraft from Jordan were flown in to Pakistan to assist the Pakistani Air Force. I can't recall any other country, but maybe one or two other countries did promise support. In 1965, it was Indonesia which had promised support to the Pakistanis. So a kind of a stronger outreach, stronger relationship and linkage within the Islamic world will always come to the assistance of Pakistan, and that is what they are essentially seeking at this particular time.
From Saudi Arabian perspective, what strategic messaging they are conveying to India by entering, knowing the situation very well between India and Pakistan, while India-Saudi relationship has been actually getting ascendant over last few years, economically, otherwise, are they sending a message to India?
When the news of this agreement emerged, one of the things that we were all looking at was the bit of hidden news that Saudi Arabia was in contact with India, even as the negotiations of this particular agreement were being undergone. That, I think, diluted this to a great extent. The fact that the Saudis were in touch with the Indian Foreign Office and perhaps conveying, not maybe in so many words, that this pact was not really targeted against India. Now, obviously, in the world of diplomacy, in the world of proactive, strong diplomacy of this nature, no one is going to put down in black and white that this pact is not against so-and-so and it is against so-and-so, etc. It caters for all kinds of contingencies. But the fact that there has been back channel talks, agreement, not agreements, but back channel understanding, and the fact that India probably is still continuing with its very strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, energy, diaspora, two major things on which our relationship is so strong. It helps tremendously. And the Saudis are obviously looking at India with this partnership also with a great degree sense of positivity. I don't think we should weigh this on the balance of who is against whom. In the sense, does India have a stronger relationship with Saudi Arabia, or does Saudi Arabia have a stronger relationship with Pakistan? Remembering the fact that over the last 15 years, maybe 10, 12 years perhaps, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan hasn't been so transformational. It's just been transactional. Pakistan did not come to their assistance to fight in Yemen. They only agreed to hold a certain element of the border, nothing more than that.
They refused to send their armed forces
Yes.
in 2015. So there is also this concern that Saudi Arabia may be sending some sort of geo-economic message to India, because Indian purchase of Russian oil, refining it, selling in the secondary market through Reliance refineries in Jamnagar has been to Saudi economic detriment. And this is Saudi Arabia's way of conveying some sort of message to India. Your comments on that, sir?
Yeah. That's a very interesting observation. I'm aware that there is a come down, a total dilution in the amount of energy coming out from Saudi Arabia to the Indian refineries. I'm told just about 6% of India's imports at the moment are coming in from Saudi Arabia, as against perhaps a much larger number earlier. It was 11% from Iran, which is almost zero from Iran at the moment. So obviously, we are hugely dependent at the moment on the Russian supply chain, and that from the United States and also from Latin America and things like that. But yes, this is an interesting observation. And there's no reason why India should not restore this line. Because after all, Saudi oil is good, sweet oil. And we have had no problems. The proximity is much more. If we are picking up from Iraq and we are picking up from Kuwait, there should be no reasons for us not to pick up from Saudi Arabia. So I suppose this is something in which there will be some laboring of intent, negotiations, some reanalysis, etc. This is one domain, definitely, where there is scope. There is tremendous scope, and it's only for the good of India. There's nothing negative coming out of it.
Sir, my last question to you is to bring another angle to this whole issue, which is still very, very fluid. We saw during Operation Sindoor, Turkey came to Pakistan's help, sent drones and other ammunition. There were Turkish naval ships in the, Arabian Sea docking at Karachi port. There were their transport planes delivering arms and ammunition to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan will always try to project as the guarantor of extended nuclear deterrence in the Islamic world. Could next step be Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey doing a trilateral on security issues?
Again, an interesting observation, but the state of Turkey-Saudi competition in the Middle East leaves that gap in the mind at the moment, whether they can come to a level where it translates into greater cooperation. The fact that both are cooperating with the United States, that perhaps brings about an angle of commonality here. But an extension of anything concerning the nuclear aspects of Pakistan being extended to any of them, even the Pakistan Saudi deal doesn't specifically touch on anything nuclear as such. Otherwise, it would have got all kinds of hackles probably which would have been raised. When it talks about security can always bring in the aspects of nuclearization also. But as we are all aware, nuclear weapons are essentially weapons of diplomacy and yes, weapons of threat here and there. So these can be utilized, they can be used, they can come to the assistance of Turkey, they can come to the assistance of Saudi Arabia in terms of more proactive and stronger diplomacy. But nothing more than that. I think it's a little premature at the moment to be able to take that angle of thinking in the emerging relationships. These are interesting times when relationships are all reshaping global order, the whole global order in disarray at the moment. At this stage, to go into specifics of nuclear promises, maybe to my mind a little premature.
Thank you very much indeed, Lieutenant General Hasnain, for your very precise and very clear-cut observations on this bilateral mutual defense pact. We understand the situation is very fluid geopolitically in entire world. So we will have some ripples here and there, but we have to keep watching and not lose our guard. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your.
Thank you very much. And your questions were very, very pointed and very professional questions. Thank you very much for that.
We would love to have you come back again on the same topic, maybe in a year's time, see what happens to this initiative.
Absolutely.
Okay.